We are here. Yes, it is Draft Raw. I'm not in the studio. I'm not with Maniac Ray. Y'all know why. COVID-19, coronavirus. It's pretty much keeping us away from the studio for right now. But when this starts to clear up, when, they tell us that we can be out and we can start basically living our normal lives again, we'll be back in studios. But for right now, I'm making this video because every Wednesday, every Friday, and even every Monday, we go and we make videos in studio, and we talk about draft prospects, obviously, if you already know this channel. So in today's episode, Draft Raw presents interior linemen. Today's episode is about the interior line. We're talking regular defensive tackles, which will be your 3 techniques. We're talking about your nose tackles, will be your 1 technique. We're talking about your 5 techniques in a 3-4, and we're even going to possibly talk about some guys that you can say would be edge guys, but probably would go inside because of size and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into it. Just to name 2 guys, Marlon Davidson and AJ Epinesa. I feel as though those are 2 players that are like 5 technique type of players that are used to playing on the edge. Marlon Davidson plays a little bit more on the inside. AJ Epinesa, you actually do see him playing the 3 technique, which is the defensive tackle, but I think that his natural position is probably the 5 technique. And then obviously, like I said, with Marlon Davidson. Once again, like I said, we're not in studio. I'm sorry for the lighting that you're seeing right here. I mean, it is what it is. I have to do it in my home. I don't got the cameras or the lighting or anything to actually give you good quality videos, but I still am going to put out these videos. So anyway, for the interior line, we're going to start with, let's start with the top 2. The top 2 guys are kind of, which is Javon Kinlaw and Derek Brown from Auburn, Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina. Both of these players are, they're quintessential the top guys. Both of them, I feel as though, are top 5 picks. Javon Kinlaw is probably not going to be a top 5 pick, especially because of the, I think he has arthritis in his knee, or he just has a serious knee problem that will, like a medical concern that will push him down the draft. But I do feel as though, you take that away. This guy, to me, Javon Kinlaw is the best defensive tackle in this draft. But Derek Brown is one of the most stout defensive tackles you'll ever see. Derek Brown reminds me a little bit of like a Gerald McCoy, but then has that natural playmaking ability of like a Ndamukong Suh. I think that he combines both of them together. I think Ndamukong is probably the bigger playmaker, but the way that Derek Brown plays as being a good run stuffer, it's definitely like a Gerald McCoy. And then when I look at Javon Kinlaw, I just see one of these new age guys that he's super tall. He's got pretty good weight on him, but he's super tall, super long, and he got this special quickness that you don't see with a lot of guys. Javon Kinlaw could actually play 5 technique. His best position still would be a 3 technique, a defensive tackle, but he's a guy that could play 5 technique. And then a guy like a Derek Brown, he's a 3 technique definitely, but a guy that could actually not play 5 technique, but can play nose because of the way that he plays with the strength that he plays and how hard it is to move him out in the run game and stuff like that. So he makes he's a natural type of player for the nose tackle position. And both these guys, like I said, they quintessential the best players. Javon Kinlaw is definitely a lot more, when I talked about his quickness earlier in this video, he's a lot more of a pass rusher type of defensive tackle that could get you some sacks in the NFL, while Derek Brown is not that type of guy, but he still makes a big impact on the game, especially if he starts to hone in on his pure strength and everything that he can do. But both guys, they can shed blocks. Both guys can have the ability to get after the quarterback. Both guys are good run stuffers. Obviously, Kinlaw is the better pass rusher. And Brown is the better run stuffer, but both guys are quintessential, once again, the top defensive tackle or interior lineman in this draft. So then the next guy on my list, we're going to talk about that James Lynch from Baylor. 6'3" or 6'4". I think he weighed around like 290. This guy is a purified technique type of player. He's a guy that, with his 300 or what we thought was a 300-pound size, he's actually 290. You would think that, okay, he's playing on the edge, but he's more of a interior looking type of player. And I think that the position of the 5 technique is the perfect position for a guy like him. He's not too big to be a defensive tackle, and he's not too small to be a defensive end. He's like right there in the middle where 5 technique usually would be. He's an aggressive player. Just looking at my notes, he's a high motor type of player. He has a ton of potential, but the biggest thing is that he needs discipline. A lot of times is that he's a little bit too wild in what he does, and he needs to hone in those skills. But his aggressiveness and high motor really pushes him up there in the draft of being one of the better interior linemen in this draft. Then we're going to take a look at Jordan Elliott from Missouri, who his play versus South Carolina wasn't good until the fourth quarter. I wasn't really impressed with when I saw his tape versus South Carolina. It just seemed like he was lackadaisical. It just wasn't really making an impact like he should. Can play the nose tackle or 5 technique. I think that he's strictly a guy that will play in a 3-4. I wouldn't put him in a 4-3 system unless you use like a versatile type of defensive line, like possibly what the Ravens do. They play both a 3-4 and a 4-3, so they make it a little bit more versatile. I saw a lot that he got stonewall, where it was just like when he tried to make a push in the middle of the pocket, he just wasn't getting nowhere, and he would just get stuck. He's quick, but he has inconsistent hands. You can see the quick hands from him, but it's just very, very inconsistent. I think that his best position is probably to be a nose tackle, to be a guy that can just stay there. Definitely not a guy that can rush the passer, but just a guy that can be more of a. He won't essentially be a run stuffer, but he can be a guy that can hold his own against the run and possibly take up blocks. So that's what I can see him as. Then next we're going to talk about Justin Manabuke from Texas A&M. He has a solid initial punch, high energy type of guy, but too much energy causes him to get run out of the play, or he ends up on the ground. He's a very quick guy. And he needs to get better at shedding blocks. That's one of the biggest things for a defensive lineman, is being able to shed blocks. To me, is one of the big things that a defensive lineman needs to do. They need to know how to shed blocks. I talked about in a previous video how to scout defensive linemen. I think I did. Or it was something similar to that. Maybe it was linebackers, but shedding blocks was what I believe was one of the top things. But having this, like I said, solid initial punch, high energy, the too much energy that he has that can cause him to run out of a play or get put on the ground, that's also kind of with discipline. And the biggest difference between him and James Lynch is that James Lynch didn't end up on the ground a lot. So that's where, James Lynch needed discipline, but he was honed and he didn't go too crazy. While Manabuke, While Manabuke ended up doing too much, and it caused him to not be able to make the plays that he could have made, which could have made him one of the top defensive linemen in this draft. Then we're going to look at Ross Blatlock from TCU. Good punch, great burst. His burst was absolutely amazing. Can shed, and he can push the pocket. Be honest with you, this guy to me is probably right there behind Kinlaw and Derek Brown. He was the only guy that I didn't see much negatives from. While every other player had certain negatives, he was that, like I said, that one guy that really didn't have that much negatives. And if you want to look at who are the better interior linemen in this draft, I think that he's a guy that needs to be put up there. And I would, if I was to have a ranking, he would be my third guy possibly. Then we're going to look at Neville Gallimore from Oklahoma. Super quick, natural inside pass rusher. Improve on shedding he needs to improve shedding on runs. I think that a lot of times, when they're at pass, when the offensive line is in pass sets, he's able to be super quick and a natural inside pass rusher, just be able to get into there. But when it comes to running plays, he's not able to shed blocks. And that could be a big problem, because in terms of he needs to learn how to get better at that. But it could be a big problem for him as a player because of as a defensive tackle, one of the biggest things you need to do is know how to stop the run. Yeah, being a great pass rusher is good, but when you can't stop the run, teams can and we've seen teams do it, run it down other teams' throats and just completely just take over the game. I mean, we saw what the Ravens did, and we saw what the 49ers did, especially when they did in the NFC Championship game versus the Green Bay Packers. They sat there and they ran the ball down their throat, and Jimmy Garoppolo only threw the ball 7 or 11 times. So it's one of those things where, Neville Gallimore definitely needs to get better at that. But to me, Neville is probably the best interior pass rusher in this draft, next to Javon Kinlaw. Probably better than Kinlaw, but Kinlaw just brings a little bit more in terms of being a run stuffer. Then we have Laurel Murchison from I believe it was Ole Miss. He only shows up big versus lesser competition. Really didn't like his tape. And he's just a gap shooter, and that was really it. I think that he was a guy that, you can kind of teach him to get better, but he was one of those guys that I don't know about him. When it came to big time competition, when it came against bigger time players, he just never did anything. And that's a big problem for me. Never being a guy that did much. You may see his highlights, and you may see a highlight here or there where he's going against a certain team, but, in the SEC, he can sit there and go against, I don't know, a Florida or Missouri, I think he probably goes, or Mississippi State, and he can go against those teams, and then he won't do nothing, or he'll make the 1 or 2 plays and he won't do much. So it's one of those things where he's like a 1 or 2 play type of person. He doesn't really impact the game, and then, like I said, when it comes to a bigger competition, he definitely doesn't impact the game. Then Davon Hamilton from Ohio State, average, just average. Raekwon Davis from Alabama, he moves well. And the biggest concern that a lot of people, I think, when they looked at his tape, and when I looked at his tape, I was expecting to see something way worse. Him moving really well was hold on, that's a little bit better than what I thought. But my thing is that he plays too high, which creates no push. When you play too high as a defensive lineman, you tend to get pushed around. He can be Raekwon can be a really good run stuffer, but when he's too high, it's just you're not moving nowhere, and he may not get moved, but you're not moving nowhere. So the impact that you thought he would make, he's not making because he's too high, and when he bursts off the ball, he needs to try to get better at staying low and being able to push the pocket. Once he does that, this guy could be one of the best defensive linemen in this draft, and maybe actually in the NFL. To be honest with you, that's what type of ability Raekwon Davis has. Then Benito Jones was very, very, very surprising to me. I'm trying to think the school that Benito went to. I can't think of it right now, but it's a very uncommon name. So if you want to know what school he went to, you just type in his name, Benito. He has a good jump. He's hard to move. He's a natural nose tackle. I think that he's one of the guys that's just straight up just a nose tackle. He's going to make a team. He's probably going to get drafted in the 3rd or 4th round. And he's going to be a good, solid player for a team. But, I mean, at the same time, he's one of those guys that you can get a nose tackle as an undrafted guy, too. So it's one of those things where, is he really draftable? But I think that his good jump, that when the ball snaps, his good jump is one thing that could really separate him. And like I said, he may not be a natural pass rusher, but he's definitely a natural nose tackle that's going to be hard to move and a run stuffer, which to me, that's still huge for the NFL. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about Utah's Leki Fotu. Aggressive, quick, very powerful, moves well, good jump, burst, and punch, and he's a good shedder. If there was another spot to put when I talk about Kinlaw, Derek Brown, and then Ross Blacklock, we can talk about Utah's Lecky Fotu. He is one of those guys where I will put him probably the fourth guy on my list. And then I'll probably it'll be a mixture between a James Lynch, a Manabuke, and Neville Gallimore as like the fifth guy. But Lecky is definitely fourth on my list. Like I said, he's aggressive, he's quick, and he's very powerful. Those things are huge. The other thing is, like I said, he moves really, really well. He's got a good jump, burst, and punch. I mean, it is amazing what you can see from him. And then when it comes to run stuff, he sheds. I mean, he's a guy that can do both. He can run stuff the run, and he can rush the passer. And he's just he's got a lot of ability. So I respect him for that. I like him for that. And I think that he will definitely be one of the better interior linemen in this draft. Definitely a natural 4-3 guy, 3 technique. And like I said, he's going to be a really, really good player when he gets to the NFL. So once again, my name is Draftrawthentic. If you don't know, this was my list for the top interior linemen in the 2020 draft. Hopefully this coronavirus goes away quickly and me and Maniac Ray will be able to get back to the studio. I thank you guys for watching. Please hit that like button. Please comment and please subscribe. Once again, like I'll say, this is Draft Raw. Goodbye.